How did a feeling of hopelessness give rise to one of Metallica's darkest songs?
The album I'm holding up in front of you is by the band Metallica. A song on this album is called Fade to Black and says the following: I have lost the will to live. Simply nothing more to give. There is nothing more for me. I need the end to set me free.
When the censorship thing started, that was one of the songs they tried to attack. Parents tried to sue bands for their own mistakes, James said. January 1984. The winter hits hard in New York City. A phone rings, and the voice on the other end announces that a truck and its contents had been stolen the night before. If the truck had not contained the gear of a young band called Metallica, the event would not have inspired what were arguably the band's darkest lyrics, at least up to that point. That was the genesis of the song Fade to Black. That same month, Metallica was scheduled to play shows in New York and Boston, among other North American cities, and then fly to Europe in what were supposed to be the band's first appearances on that continent. The night before the Boston show, the Metallica crew drove a truck loaded with the group's amps, drums, and gear from New York City to Massachusetts, while the musicians had planned to follow them the next day. However, just before leaving, the members of Metallica were informed that the truck had been stolen with everything inside. James said on The Howard Stern Show in 2013, I remember writing Fade to Black on Metal Joe's couch. He took us in when our manager basically kicked us out of his house and we were supposed to go to Europe for the first time, and our gear had gotten stolen. Our then tour manager had a U-Haul filled with our gear, and someone stole the whole U-Haul. This put the next activities of the band on hold. At that point, the presentation in Boston was unthinkable, and the first European tour had to be canceled. We were very depressed. It was my favorite Marshall amp, man, James recalled when he mentioned to Rolling Stone magazine.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please as we go through the following safety instructions. If you need a passenger who wants to...
Later that year, Metallica managed to reschedule some European dates before settling in Denmark, where they would record what ended up being Ride the Lightning, an album that is testimony to a great evolution in a brief time, with more layered and nuanced compositions than its predecessor. Lars would later mention that it was the moment when they realized that you don't have to rely on speed to be powerful and heavy.
In the lyrics, if you get more specific, it closes, I guess, the door that people are able to walk into.
I felt a lot smarter after those lyrics came out, James said, comparing the weight of words between Metallica's first two albums. Ride the Lightning and Fade to Black lyrics were about putting in the place of the person who is going through those situations and trying to get these feelings out. In that same interview with Rolling Stone magazine, he also clarified that he never thought of harming himself, despite the uncertainty and mourning for the stolen equipment.
The album I'm holding up in front of you is by the band Metallica. It's on Elektra Asylum Records. A song on this album is called Fade to Black. I have lost the will to live. Simply nothing more to give. There is nothing more for me. I need the end to set me free. Death greets me warm. I will just say goodbye.
When the censorship thing started, that was one of the songs they tried to attack. Parents tried to sue bands for their own mistakes, but we got tons and tons of letters saying, Fade to Black saved my life. But no one wants to read that. It's too nice, too boring, James said, referring to the Parents Music Resource Center, or PMRC, who were starting to demand that albums be labeled for their explicit material.
We are asking the recording industry to voluntarily assist parents who are concerned by placing a warning label on music products. The Parents Music Resource Center, we now propose one generic warning label to inform consumers in the marketplace about lyric content. The labels would apply to all music. A voluntary labeling is not censorship. Censorship implies restricting access or suppressing content. This proposal does neither.
But Fade to Black also made them a target of criticism from their own fans. On The Stern Show in 2013, Lars said, "We had a song called Fade to Black that we still play almost every show, and James thought it would be a great idea to have acoustic guitars on the album. When the metal community heard a Metallica song with acoustic guitars, everyone lost their lunches." James said, "We've heard that we've sold out forever, but it's all relative to what your world is and how small your world is. So we've stayed honest to ourselves, and that's also all we can do." Almost 4 decades later, Fade to Black is testimony to a time of uncertainty for the band, which filtered through the voice of a first-person narrator became a classic, an essential song on the Metallica setlist and on the fans' playlist. How did Megadeth go from being the quote-unquote political band on MTV to being completely banned? And then, how did they sneak back into that channel screen?
This is heavy security.